On today's World Insight, China's top diplomat in Germany on the last leg of a European tour, the pandemic and trade. Mission accomplished.
The engagement between Europe and China was very intense over the last 8 weeks.
And potential candidates from around-the-clock research on a COVID-19 vaccine. The details from Chinese CDC Director Gao Fu.
COVID-19 virus will survive for a while or dominate for a while in those areas, and especially for some extremely humid and low temperature environment.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei in Beijing. State Councilor and Foreign Minister from China, Wang Yi, is in Germany today, the fifth and final leg of his European tour. The pandemic and trade are expected to top the agenda with his German counterpart. Over the past week, Mr. Wang did the rounds in Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, and France. Could improving relations between China and Europe help steer away from global tensions? How big is that hope? Let's loop in our panelists from China and Germany. For relations between China and some of the European countries, including some of the latest visited by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, let's join our panel. In Beijing, Liu Mingli, Deputy Director of the Institute of European Studies with China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. Also in Beijing, joining us, Jörg Wuttke, President of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. Gentlemen, welcome to our program. Start with you, Mr. Wuttke. The trip has been quite a shuttling diplomacy. How much do you think a better understanding, at least the face-to-face, has created between China and some of the European countries Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited?
Well, I guess it always helps to meet and to also have chit-chat on the side. The engagement between Europe and China was very intense over the last 8 weeks. There was a high economic dialogue and a summit taking place. But now, of course, the foreign minister is with a purpose in Europe. We have the summit with Merkel on the 14th of September. And then, of course, US pressure on China has been increasing. So I think it's more than logic that Foreign Minister Wang is seeking out what kind of cooperation models he can develop with Europe.
No secret, Mr. Liu, that Foreign Minister there is trying to work with the European countries, getting better understanding of the nature of the U.S. approach and try to seek a possible plan between China and some of the major European capitals. But how much is this more bilateral? How much is this more toward the third party, the United States? Many wonder.
I think during this trip, Foreign Minister Wang Yi has addressed the importance of multilateralism. I think, yes, the multilateralism is very important. I think it's the only way to escape the power politics from the competition, serious competition between China and the United States. And multilateralism is based on good bilateral cooperations. Without bilateral cooperation, how can we achieve multilateralism? How to achieve multilateral cooperation? So during this trip, Foreign Minister Wang Yi has visited 5 member states of the European Union to enhance the bilateral cooperations, and also through this good bilateral cooperation, and I think the EU and China will find more opportunity to enhance the multilateralism.
Okay, from Chinese perspective, bilateral investment agreement with China and European countries, it is crucial in terms of building trust and confidence of future cooperation. It's also crucial for China's opening process. But at the same time, China wants it to be fair, quote unquote, according to the Chinese standards too. So to China, what are some of the areas that's crucial that the European counterparts should also understand?
Yes, I think the BID talk is one of the priorities, or maybe the top priority of the bilateral negotiations. Both sides, the leaders of both sides are committed to draw the conclusion by the end of this year. And this agreement is very important because from the European side, the European enterprises want more access to the growing Chinese market. They believe some areas are still not open to the European enterprises. But for Chinese part, Chinese are also concerned about its investment in Europe. We have seen the screening measures from both the European Union level and member states level on the foreign investment outside the European Union, including China's 5G enterprises. So China is also concerned about the openness of the European market. And I think the European side has talked a lot about the level playing or fair trade with China, but also China also concerned about the openness of the 5G industry. Right, this the BIT is important because it can ensure China's investment in the European Union, which was declining dramatically during the past 5 years, and it also means a lot for the European companies who want to have more access to Chinese market.
Holding his hand to his face, I'm sure Mr. Woodke already having some answers for some of the concern from the Chinese side.
The whole purpose of an agreement is, of course, to lower the threshold for exceptions, because exceptions seem to be very tedious in order to make business more complex.
Yes.
On 5G, of course, the member states have to decide. It's not a European decision. The investment agreement really looks into the investment opening of the market in order to establish yourself in finance, insurance, and so forth. And again, Europe is in the midst of discussing this. I have not seen any text, but I know that in particular, the interest, of course, is also in the biosecurity area. So, of course, I can imagine, but I'm actually not privy to the negotiations, that ICT would include Chinese equipment in Europe. But again, this is beyond my knowledge, and I don't know what's being discussed.
So the building of negotiations surrounding bilateral investment agreement is one measure to build confidence and trust. On the other hand, that confidence and trust in one another could be at least some of the basic factors with which a negotiation could only be done with. So it seems to be, the two sides of the same coin in a way. Fundamentally, the question for both sides, if I could ask it directly, are two things. For the European capitals, knowing exactly, Mr. Woodke, that one capital could be different from the other capital, but there is still an European approach, is whether Europe will be able to make its independent decision. We have seen some of the earlier signs that there might be concern about it as a result of Huawei issue, at least from the Chinese side, whether Europe will be able to make its own decision independent from what Washington wants. On the other hand, Mr. Liu, many would also ask China, is what China is trying to do mainly looking at the other party, which is the United States? Is this sincere willingness from the Chinese side to work with the Europeans and thinking about the issues in a framework where Europe and China could really work together, not just for the current geopolitics? So I want to have both of you to respond to this, what I consider relatively fair questions. Mr. Woodke, you want to go first, and then Mr. Liu. Can you make independent decisions? Really?
Well, first of all, I mean, Europe is quite familiar with American pressure on many areas. Just think about the issues that we have on Russia and other places. So we have made very clear where our interests are. We do it between Europe and China. We have been showing as Europeans versatility and sort of ability in order to conclude deals. We did free trade agreements with Korea, Japan, Singapore, Vietnam, and other places over the last years. That just shows that Europe is not just able to talk about deals, but actually concluding them and implementing them. So in a way, DNA of Europe is a compromise, and we think that we are willing and able in order to compromise with China.
Mr. Liu, what about that? Is it mainly looking at the third party?
I don't deny the American factor between China and Europe relations. America was there. When we take a look at the United Kingdom, we will find that the U.S. pressure has changed United Kingdom's policy towards China in terms of 5G issues. There are similar cases for the European partners in the continent. Why the U.S. is so involved in the bilateral relations between China and Europe? Because we cannot neglect American influence even for Europe, because Europe and the United States are traditional allies. For the future cooperation between China and Europe in terms of 5G issue, I think most member states of the European Union have been considering their policies in terms of 5G issue towards China. Some have changed the policies under the pressure of the United States, but there are still others who are considering or reconsidering their policies. So it's very important for the two sides, for China and the European partners, to negotiate, to build trust with each other.
But what kinds of timeline, September 14th or even longer timeline, are we looking at? There are quite a number of politically sensitive dates later this year regarding, the U.S. presidential election, regarding China-EU leaders' meetings and of various forms in various areas. So what kind of timeline can we really looking at, Mr. Woodke?
Let me first start to say, if you think that European decision-making is based on what the White House is amplifying, then I think this is a gross misjudgment, and I hope that Foreign Minister Wang Yi actually heard this from the horse's mouth in the Elysee as well as today in Germany, that we are willing to do this and we don't have to look to the United States. And also, if you just look at all the trade conflicts that we have, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline as well as Airbus Boeing indicates that we are not just an annex to the United States. I think China really has to make a commitment and see that they see Europe as a whole, and that we're able to make a decision. It's very interesting that you mentioned the UK. The UK has left the European Union. Possibly that led to a closer alignment with the United States. We look at the 14th of September in order to come up with some better understanding, to give it a political push from Angela Merkel as President Xi. And then, of course, we have only a couple of weeks left. There's the party congress here. There is the big council meeting in Berlin at the end of September. And then this is D-Day, is the possible big meeting still happening in Leipzig in Germany in December, when, if COVID permits, President Xi will visit Europe and we can hopefully conclude this. This would lead to a political agreement, and then you leave it up to the lawyers for 1 year. And I hope that then the parliaments in Europe is all in agreement with this one. So this is really crunch time. We talk about months rather than years.
Oh, Mr. Liu, urgent timetable, it seems that, at least from Mr. Woodke. What about from your side?
I think from the perspective of the United States, I don't think we will wait for a timeline to promote the bilateral cooperation between China and Europe, because even for the presidential election in November, we don't know the result. We don't know whether the competition between China and the United States will be mitigated by a new U.S. administration. We don't know that. But the pragmatic cooperation between China and Europe will be beneficial for both sides and for even the whole world. For example, both sides of Europe and China are committed to climate change. Both sides are committed to further openness of their economy. Both sides are committed to the finalization of the BIT talks. So we don't have to wait for the result of a United States election. We just focus on what we need to do and produce concrete result, which serve both sides and the whole world.
You know, the United States is the biggest country in the world. It plays a crucial part, at least it used to, with credibility then, playing crucial part in the international governance system. So now, can you really work anything out without the participation of the U.S.? Can China and European capitals really be able to do that? Or China and EU really be able to do that? Mr. Liu, and then Mr. Woodke.
Yes, I think so. For example, European Union has just got the recovery fund, which is over 700 billion euros. And among them, about 30% will go to digital economy and green development. And the European Union, one of the priorities of the European Union is to mitigate climate change and develop green development. It's all the case for China. China also thinks green development. So I think there are a lot for the two sides can work with each other for detailed cooperations. And for the safety of the supply chain, it's all the case for China and Europe. Both are trading economies, and both China is the number 2 trading partner to Europe, and the European Union is also very important to China. Those sides can enhance the bilateral trade relations despite the United States policies, because it is necessary. We don't have a lot of time to waste. We don't have to wait for the result of the U.S. election.
Well, I mean, it's a great tragedy that the former guardian of world trade, the United States, has gone off rail and has turned into a country that is instigating trade war and now in many ways is in the midst of a tech war. Certainly, we can, as Europeans and China, work together in order to maintain what is there. We should be wary about establishing new organizations, new establishments. We hope that at one stage we can all come back to a better understanding, multilateral. But you know, this doesn't mean that we have to waste time on climate change. We cannot waste time. And that's actually where it's very encouraging to see that China sticks to the Paris Agreement. China has to show in the 14th five-year plan that actually they mean it in order to reduce emissions. China is now the largest emitter, and we need China to succeed in that field, and Europe can help. So yes, there are overlapping, and we don't have to dismantle because possibly we can't come up with something better in the first place.
Mr. Wuttke, you are representing a German company, a huge German multinational company in China. You're also representing the European business members of the European Chamber of Commerce. Tell me, what's going to be the strategies for business executives like you or companies like that of yours who are operating in such an extensive way in China over the decades of reform and opening up of this country? How are you going to look at the current market and its relations with the rest of the global strategy your companies have?
Well, first of all, it's very difficult to see the immediate future. It's sometimes very easy to look 10 years from now. And if you just look at all the projections that we did, China will be standing for 30% of global growth over the next 10 years. That is as much as the entire OECD countries together. And in my own case, in chemicals, it stands for 60% of global growth, 60. So, I mean, you have to be here in order to be relevant in the global marketplace. There is no doubt that European companies are not leaving China. They are possibly looking into new alternatives for new investment in case these back home countries want to have less reliance on a couple of things, but overall, our surveys indicate very clearly we are not there to leave. And 10 years ago, we asked our members, are you thinking about leaving China? 20% says yes. And we asked them during COVID, and it was just 10%. So even at times of stress, people are sticking to the market. We are in China for China.
Is that encouraging, Mr. Liu?
If we take a broader view, we will find that European enterprises are still have a strong interest in this market. And as far as I know, for the most majority of the enterprises from Europe who are running business in China, they are benefiting, they are earning money in this market. I think compared with other major economies, China is still an attractive market.
What about Chinese businesses investing in Europe?
Yes, the reality is that Chinese investment direct investment in Europe has been declining since the year 2016. There are a lot of reasons to explain this kind of decline. First of all, we have talked about the new legislation and screening measures from the European and the member states. But there are also other measures because Chinese enterprises are reconsidering their investment abroad. Chinese are also concerned the foreign reserve of itself, and the Chinese the enterprises maybe they have less momentum to invest abroad. Yes, China's investment in Europe has been declined amid the pandemic, but the overall Chinese investment toward the world has been, to some extent, it has been declining. So, if we see this issue from a broader view, we find that European Union as a market is not an exception. So still, I think when the pandemic is gone, when Chinese enterprises are ready to go abroad again, I think European Union still will be a very attractive market for Chinese enterprises. If we get the BAT done by the end of this year, they will have a better future.
We want to thank both of you helping us understand all the latest and certainly keep our fingers crossed for some achievements of the bilateral investment agreement or treaty between China and European countries. Liu Mingli, Jörg Wuttke, thank you so much for joining us and be well. Welcome back. This is World Insight with me, Tian Wei. As global COVID-19 cases go on a deep rise, scientists are racing to find an effective coronavirus vaccine. At present, some vaccine candidates have started phase 3 clinical trials, with China contributing to the frontrunners. But to offer billions a safe and effective vaccine is a challenging task. Limited supply of a potential vaccine is likely to be met by overwhelming demand. With these in mind, I talked to world-renowned virologist and immunologist, Dr. Gao Fu, otherwise known as Frank Gao. He is the director of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, or China CDC. Let's listen to all the latest from him. If you look at the U.S. situation, some really wonder whether at some point there's going to be herd immunity. Now it's 6 million up compared to the overall generation. It's still a very small percentage. But are we heading in that direction? And meanwhile, there's debate about exactly what is herd immunity. Some say 10% of the population, some say 20%, some even argue about 40%. And some say it varies from one virus to another virus. So these are debates that we don't even know about the answers. How do we know that we will have the capabilities to deal with the virus?
I think the herd immunity is always an issue, and there's a lot of debate and discussion over there. Of course, you are talking about recent data shows 10% or whichever percent, but it's not very high. But to achieve herd immunity, you can either through the natural infection, like everybody thought herd immunity is a natural infection. Leave the virus there and dance with the virus, and then eventually a percentage of the population will get the immunity against the virus. That's a lot of people think this is the herd immunity. That's a natural infection. But also you can think about, on the other hand, you can have by the vaccination.
That's right.
So by developing vaccines, if everybody says, 70% of people vaccinated with a vaccine, you also can get the huge herd immunity.
So you're talking about 70%, 70, that's the number you're looking at for herd immunity through vaccine on COVID-19?
We don't know the percentage. That's our estimate. We might need 70%.
Where does this number come from?
From the transmissibility, R0, and also, what we saw from the current data. I'll give you an example. For example, if you want to have a herd immunity for measles, you want over 90%.
That's right.
And
I remember we all had that, right?
Exactly. So if you don't have the 90%, the whole herd or the whole population cannot be protected. You might get a reinfection. But for this one, so that's from current data. For our current transmissibility, we estimate, I use the word might, We won't need a 70%.
Do we have cases in which countries already achieved or regions already achieved somewhat herd immunity? Do we know?
I mean, if we had enough vaccine, of course, we should immediately get 70% people vaccinated, but we don't. So in this case, it all depends. This is why we are talking about we might have the urgent use of the vaccine. It all depends on the special groups. People ask, do we need a vaccine? Should I be vaccinated? So I'm telling everybody, vaccine, the population target population are normal or healthy. Well, let's put the healthy people. When you inject anything to the healthy people, safety, efficacy is a very important factor. When you think about that, well, you might not want to vaccinate everybody. In my opinion, the first group should be the group who maintain the society running. For example, policemen and border control.
Public service.
Yeah, all the public service, service people.
Do we have international standards that would tell layman people like me what are some of the qualities that one vaccine must have before I agree to have it? So can you tell us more about that regarding particularly COVID-19?
It's not just particularly for COVID-19, any vaccines. You have to fulfill those three conditions. Safety.
Okay.
You got to make sure you got, everybody being injected, they got a safe stuff there. And then efficacy. You make sure, I'm being vaccinated, it's effective, it's efficacious for me, to prevent anything. A third, quality control. Make sure you and me, we were vaccinated with the same quality of the products. So safety, efficacy, and quality control.
Every step of the way, we see new challenges. For example, Professor Gao, whether the virus mutates, at what speed, you earlier touched on that, but that will be the key issue about whether vaccine we're developing today will still be eligible for us once it's developed and produced. Professor, what do you think?
Yeah, for everybody is worried about the mutation. Obviously the virus is mutating. As far as the knowledge we have or the data we have at the moment, we don't see any mutations at the moment. They would have any effect for the vaccine under development. There's no evidence.
Flu season. I don't want to mention about that, but that's a reality, unfortunately. So we're facing, at a time, COVID-19 spread so fast, even faster than the earlier. And then vaccine being developed, not yet when it comes to the final result. At the same time, the winter flu season is coming. Now, the flu season also has its own vaccines, right? Usually. Sometimes work, sometimes doesn't work very well. So it's a very complex situation, I think, for public health researchers like you. How would all of these murky waters mixed together work?
That's a big challenge for the public health at the moment. We are predicting we will have a situation or scenario, COVID-19 mixed with flu. However, we have some evidence early this year because of the NPI, non-pharmacological intervention. The flu cases gone down.
For example, people wear masks.
Exactly.
People are keeping social distance. People are staying at home more, work from home. So all these contribute to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is why though we are facing flu season, but because of the NPI, mask and social distancing, all this there.
But then here's the issue about, Professor Gao, whether we should wait for the COVID-19 vaccine, coronavirus vaccine this time, and combine it with the flu vaccine, or we need to preferably have the flu vaccine first once it's available. So this could always be a question. Some suggest that probably the two can be combined by researchers once the efficient coronavirus vaccine comes out. I do not know which is the best way. What would you suggest?
Personally, at least in this season, I don't think we should wait for the combination, because for the COVID-19, we still don't know, the safety and efficacy
of the
so
vaccine
we still, but for the flu, at least we know it's safe,
right.
and with some percentage of efficacy.
I see.
And also, because of the years, and we know it works, and the quality control, COSI, is good. So for those three major factors for the any vaccines, I encourage people to vaccinate flu first, and wait for the COVID-19. Let's say, wait and see when and anybody who should be vaccinated.
Another thing very important, talking about vaccine reinfection, because we have seen earlier, for example, some of the travelers, they were in their hometown infected with COVID-19. But then after they recovered, they traveled to other places. And yet they were found infected again with a different kinds of COVID-19 strain. So here's the issue of whether reinfection is going to be the real challenge for many of us. If that is the case, then the vaccines become extremely tricky.
That's a very good question. Thanks to the science.
Did I ask a good question to the scientists?
Yeah, thanks to the science. Because of the science, because of genomic sequencing, we can identify the virus for the initial infection and for the second infection.
That's right.
So that's the science. Without that, you cannot know, even you were reinfected, you cannot distinguish, from the original infection to the second infection.
Okay, that's the sunny side of it. I realize as a scientist yourself, you want to talk about the sunny side of it and also the reality side. What about the reality side, the difficult part of it?
Yeah, we only have some cases. A good example is from Hong Kong. That's already through the peer-reviewed journal, Clinical Infectious Diseases, is already published.
Right.
And I think, taking that case as an example, the Hong Kong scientists, they tried to test for the antibody. Of course, that patient, because of the second infection, they didn't see any antibody. That implies either this patient with the initial infection and there's no immune response, no antibody, or the antibody declined to the level, by the method we are using, you cannot detect. So,
or antibody for one strain of the virus, not necessarily antibody for the other strains of the virus.
At the moment, at least for the strain we did, I think the Hong Kong scientists, they did the sequencing. There's no evidence.
There's no evidence of any
but the problem, because this special or particular case, and he didn't show the antibody from the first initial test when they get this reinfection.
I see.
So I think don't try to exaggerate too much about one case. Again, I want to leave the science to science. That's just a science. But there's no evidence for the population.
Right.
When you are talking about infectious diseases, you've got to put everything at the population level. So that's very important for the public to understand what is going on.
Tell me more about the global situation, prevention, control, COVID-19. Things are still evolving as we speak.
Yeah, as you know, in general, you can see, though we have experienced in China, I call it 5 waves. So when you define the waves, that means you have the peak and always there, you get it down. So this is why from Wuhan to northeast provinces like Heilongjiang, Jilin province, we have imported cases from Russia. And then we have Beijing, Xinfadi, and then you have Xinjiang, Uyghur Autonomous Region, and after that you have recent Dali outbreak. So I call it the 5 outbreak. And because we did rigorous control measures, it's done. That general in China, but we are still facing a serious problem by some importing cases. So because in general, for the whole world, the pandemic is still there. And in some countries, due to the community level control, the key for the control of this pandemic is a community level control. Yeah, because of that, you look at in Europe, in America, North and South America, it's still there. However, if you look at in some other areas, like in Thailand, they have a very good suppression strategy and it works very well. As far as I remember, in Thailand, they have almost 100 days COVID-19 local transmission free. So that's a big achievement for Thailand as well.
A lot of the Chinese cases, if you look back at some of the latest events related to, for example, the seafood market. So there creates a debate about whether frozen seafood or imported frozen seafood had anything to do with what we are facing today.
Because, this debate is based on the fact. The fact is the fact. So, that's very important. Cases, and they originated from some seafood market or some, meat processing factories.
Right.
So it looks like the virus, the COVID-19 virus, will survive for a while or dormancy for a while in those areas, very humid, and especially for some, extremely humid and low temperature environment. So it looks like that. So we are doing a lot of work for that to try to trace back. So where's the virus come from? So that's very important.
Any new development on that?
We are still working on it. For example, why I call in China, we all have 5 waves, because the virus from Wuhan and the virus from Beijing, Xinjiang, Dalian, and northeastern countries, when you do the genetic sequencing, the genomics tells you they are different. So because they are different, this is why I call it 5 waves. When you are talking about those humid seafood market, so looks like there's some direct link there. Of course, we cannot get any conclusion whether or not the virus is transmitted through the food. No, there's no direct evidence, no solid data yet. But that's the environment would help the virus replicate, help the virus dormancy there.
When you are talking about the differences in genome, are you talking about strains, or are you talking about specific genome designs that existed there?
Yeah, it's strains or clades. When coronavirus, it's not like a flu or any other virus. They are very diversified. Coronavirus in general is very conserved. It's not that as diversified as the flu. So only trace amount of the difference, but by doing the NGS or next generation sequencing, you can identify the difference among different origins of viruses. This is why you look at what happened in China, we can see the difference for the virus.
Another thing is, if you look at the global issue, Professor Gao, very sad, I would say. Yeah. In the United States today, it's already 6 million. 128,000 deaths, probably even more because some could be underreported. That's just one country. If you look at India, 80,000 daily newly reported cases. What kind of dire situation are we really facing as a human being today regarding COVID-19 now?
Well, when I was asked some question like that, why we are encountering such a covered or looks like could, very clever virus. The virus has a lot of hidden characters. If you take all the knowledge we know about the virus, this virus tells us or teaches us a lot of new knowledge. So that's exactly, if you borrow any knowledge, take any knowledge even from flu or any other like SARS, MERS. So this is totally different virus. When I say different, totally different means the characteristics of this virus. So this is why, the human beings, we have to, I call it, quote, dance with this virus. While we are controlling this virus, meanwhile, we have to learn from this. So this is why I call the relationship between the virus and the human beings.
My exclusive interview with Gao Fu, Director of China CDC on vaccines and the global pandemic situation. That's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, you can search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. Bye for now.